Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of Not Too Comic Book. This being a show where we talk about TV shows that are adaptations of comic books. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about the season premiere of Raising Dion. A great season premiere. A lot of really interesting things went down in this episode, so let's break it down. Well, first and foremost, I should also note, obviously because it was a long time since the first season came out in 2019, I ended up rewatching season 1, and I'm glad. The recap does a really good job, but I'm still glad to have rewatched it. I should also note, if you have not rewatched season 1, you should, just for the purposes of also how uncomfortable it made me, the whole Pat thing. It completely changes that entire season when you rewatch it with the context of knowing Pat being who he is. It just makes, you can, even the levity moment, you're just kind of like, ugh. Every word out of his mouth is, ugh, because you know the context behind it. It's such a wild experience. I wasn't expecting that when I started my rewatch. Either way, putting that aside, obviously tying into it, but we're picking up 2 years later, obviously, like, you know, outside the show, but also within the show. So, Braden's kind of been off on his own the entire time, and obviously he's up there using powers to, like, he's able to push people, get inside of their heads and make them do stuff. At first I was like, oh, is it the Crooked Man, or, like, that power, like, the storm, like, is that what was doing that? But it's like, no, like, Braden has the power to, like, he has telekinesis, he has telepathy, so I guess his powers have grown to the point he can now, not only could he get inside of people's heads before, or at least from what we saw, now it seems like he can straight up push people. He can get inside their heads even more so. So either that's just his powers naturally expanding, just like Dion's have, or either it's that or the storm inside has helped amplify his abilities. But he's still a kid regardless. He's just using his powers to get whatever he wants. Initially it was just, oh, I'm going to get that Nintendo Switch. Oh, you don't have enough tickets. Oh, I have enough. I'm going to bounce. It does seem interesting though, because it does seem like it's not like a permanent thing. Like, I guess if he doesn't constantly re-up it, it does seem like it wears off, because the people he's basically forcing to be his parents, I'm assuming he kept re-upping every, like, school trip. I mean, not the entire, I don't know why I said school trip, like the entire journey to Atlanta, because the moment he started leaving, that's when at the game, the arcade, the lady who gave out the prizes was almost like, wait, what? So, like, I don't know whether it's just, like, location based, like, as long as he's in your proximity, the mind control will stay, or is it just, like I said, does he have to re-up it? It's the first episode, so we're getting introduced to that, so we'll probably have to wait a little bit before we really get the full, how strong and weaker that can be. So I thought it was interesting though that guy attacks Braden, which I'm like, oh, you picked the wrong person. I thought he was going to use his own powers, because I thought I'm surprised, because there's such a distinction between Braden and the Storm, whereas, like, it seems like, I mean, maybe this season will give us more context, but it seemed at the time, like, more so like the Storm was uncontrollable. It kicked in whenever it needed to, but it seemed like Pat leaned into it sometimes. Because the Storm seems like it goes after people with a darker instinct in him. With the little bit of time we spent with Braden, he definitely does seem like he has darker instincts in him a little bit. So the question becomes, like, why hasn't the Storm completely controlled him? It might be because of his own abilities. His abilities, him having a telepathic ability might actually fortify his mind from being completely consumed by it, like Pat was, to some extent. Like I said, maybe this season will give us some context on Pat's situation to let you know, like, oh, maybe there were times where Pat fully wasn't in control, which he made it seem like there were times like it just consumed him and that's all he could do. But then, like I said, there are other times where it seemed like he leaned into it, but it might just been like it poked and prodded at the dark aspects of himself to make it seem like it was him more in control, when in actuality he wasn't. Like I said, we'll learn more about the ins and outs, but the Storm ended up killing the guy that Jack tried to steal from Braden, and Braden was like, oh, you didn't have to kill him, which I was surprised. That kind of leads into my point of, like, oh, you're not as, like, bloodthirsty as I thought you were. Season 1 kind of set it up to be like, oh, like, Dad, you should have shot them. And his dad was like, whoa, Braden, don't let me catch you talking like that again. You know, it was just meant to scare them away. So I guess some of what his dad said last season, obviously that was 2 years ago, but I guess that's still somewhere ingrained in him. That he's like, right, I was hoping you'd scare him away. I didn't expect you to actually kill him, which I think is ironic. But I think maybe that's some part of Braden still holding on to what his dad taught him, because regardless of anything, he loved his dad. And maybe, and I think that's also the ironic thing, that you are working and walking around with the very thing that killed him. But maybe the argument could be like, no, that was Pat who did that. Me, I wouldn't do that. We're buddies. We're in this together. Who knows what deal Braden made with that thing. I mean, I guess it's like, right, he hates Dion just as much as this thing hates Dion. So, because I was left alone with my aunt rather than Charlotte taking me because she'd rather get back to Dion because she cared about you. She left me behind. She should have taken me, but she chose you over me. That whole thing. So, once again, he's a kid who's going through something traumatic. So, everyone has their way of kind of processing and dealing with trauma, So, that's all I'm trying to get at. But, bouncing forward with what's going on with Dion and Nicole. Obviously, Nicole has been, in talks with Bayana since all of this has come out. And so, in fact, they're actually reaching out to her to kind of be on their board of directors, to kind of serve as someone who could be an intermediary between the powered and the non-powered, because obviously they've leaned into it now that they found out that there are other people out there with abilities, and they want to help them, and they're going to try and find a way. But as someone who has a son who is powered, and someone who is just a regular person, she can bridge that gap between the both worlds. And I love they will also say, like, oh, your son's a star. She's like, oh, don't say that. Don't call him that, because you're not the one that has to live with him. They're laughing. And she's like, no, I'm serious. Don't call him that, because I think for her, it's like, it's going to go to his head, and he's 2 years older now, and he's less likely to listen to me, like, if you, like, inflate his ego any more than it is. But doing the mind mover thing, upgraded his gear a little bit, doing his friendly neighborhood superhero thing, as I talked about in a little bit in my watch list. But closing trash cans, making sure people's mail gets delivered. It's the TOJ, the Triangle of Justice. 3 becoming 1, I think, is kind of dope. It just, when I hear that, it just immediately makes me think of Charmed. But I love that. She's Invisible Girl, which is very befitting, because the whole thing about Esperanza being like the invisible girl that no one ever notices. And then Jonathan trying to, what was he, the Administer Annihilator or something like that. Even later on, Esperanza's like, Annihilator Kill Guy? Is that what he's like, no, Annihilator or something like, it was super cute. And to see them kind of like this somewhat well-oiled machine, and Dion wanting to do a little bit more as he sees some kids bullying and taking some kids basketball. He wants to do more, but they're crossing the street, so it's like that's outside of their jurisdiction. If he goes, because they've got the lay of the lands of the neighborhood enough to know, like, right where he can go without getting captured on camera or too many people being around. So, because powered people is still like a big Bayana secret. Until they can like brace the world, understand all this better, help, the powered community understand more about their situation, and slowly like intertwine them with the public, because last thing you need is the public freaking out and learning like, wait, there's people out here with superpowers, especially when some of them aren't good, like the Pat situation. So, but I love that he got caught because his mom was she tracked his phone, and he was like, wait, you could do that? And it's like, yes. I love that's a running theme in this. I guess it's going to be a continuous theme of him constantly losing his phone, maybe. I'm like, you'd think he'd keep a better grip on that, but I mean, once again, you're just a kid, you're likely to lose stuff, which is almost befitting, because my youngest niece has a tendency where I have to always help her find her phone, so I'm like, oh, that's too true. I've experienced that myself too much to be on the end of like, okay, where's the last place you left it? All right, let me help you track it down. Oh, it fell in between the chairs. That's why you couldn't find it. It felt a little too real. I was like, Jesus, that hits a little too close to home. So it's very believable that a kid would just leave it everywhere, leave a phone everywhere. So I just think that's so funny. But it was also interesting, obviously, the conversation between, Nicole and Dion about, him wanting to be a superhero, but she wants him just to be a kid. It's like, right, like, enjoy, like, you have your entire life ahead of you to kind of worry about the whole superhero thing. Just learn to control your powers and also enjoy just being a kid, Because it's like, right, that thing is still out there, and Dad told me to be ready. It's like, well, that's not exactly what he told you. And it's like, yeah, but he's like, yeah, I beat a monster. He's like, no, we beat a monster with your dad's help. So it's just like, right, just don't go looking for a fight if you don't have to. just enjoy being a kid for a while. Like, put all the superhero stuff on hold for a while. And obviously he looks outside and sees a hole in the ground. Apparently, we end up getting more context for it later on, but Baiano has been in examining this, and it turns out that these holes sprang up 3 months ago. You're like, huh. Now, if they had sprung up like 2 years ago, that'd be one thing. But it's like, why 3 months ago? The question is, what happened 3 months ago? And I'm curious if Pat has something to do with that. But it's like, yeah, why 3 months ago? Like, all the holes all around the world have been. So I guess they're all places that Pat had some interaction with. Like, he released a storm and left some, like, I guess some fragment of that thing's power has been left any place he ended up killing someone powered, and I guess all of those spots are opening up, or at least maybe concentrated areas, because it seems specifically that spot, there's one that was in Rome, and there's no way like that has any correlation to Braden, so that had to be all stuff that was happening with Pat when he was going around tracking everyone down over those years, all those powered people, I'm assuming, because they talked about like all the corrupted spots that Pat had hit, which we never really have circled back to it, but there is that corruption in Iceland. Like, there's that one patch where that meteor shower happened, where everyone got their powers. That's still protected and still pristine, but there's still that corruption thing we haven't dealt with, which kind of plays into Pat needing to be healed by Dion. So I think, obviously, there's a correlation between all of it. Now, these areas that are kind of corrupted are slowly opening up after since 3 months ago. Braden transferring to their school, because Dion doesn't know about Braden. The only one who knows about Braden is his mom, and then he'll probably talk to his mom. He's like, yeah, there's this new kid at my school, and it'll probably be a little while before she finds out about Braden, because she'll be like, oh, that's a very unique name, and it's not going to be until, because Charlotte's not around to give her like, wait, that's the Braden kid I met. Like, she probably wouldn't correlate that, but it's probably going to be a little while before. Well, because she knows the farmer, like Braden's dad, is like, right, I know his last name. So hearing Braden's last name made her go like, wait, what? She might not realize like, oh, he's evil or something, but he might just be like, oh yeah, like my aunt brought me here and I told her about you and how we could help each other. Like, they'll start off as like friends. He'll probably try to get close to Dion and probably like try to mess up his life. Probably try and take Esperanza and Jonathan from him and destroy him, because it's like, right, like I was left alone, so I'm gonna leave you alone with no one. Like, maybe that's going to be the argument of like, he's going to probably try and take Dion's life. Because Dion is surrounded by people. He has people who care about him and embrace his abilities, whereas we know his aunt was kind of religious and kind of looked upon his dad as kind of like, he strayed from the path of God and kind of made a deal with the devil, and she probably kind of looked at him kind of the same way, hence why he killed her. Or maybe that wasn't 100% him, maybe that was just crooked energy, as they kind of referred to it, just like doing it himself, being like, oh, I'm setting you free, let's join forces. Once again, we don't have a lot of context for like the final scene of season 1, but regardless. But circling back to the Triangle Justice, I do love they had their little thing of like, right, if they have to basically do everything together, 3 become 1. So it's like, cool, there's that tractor thing that Jonathan wanted to go to, then Dion wanted to go to like that Dragon Con thing, so I want us to sign up for like a chorus thing, and it turns out Nicole was going to do it, but Dion was like, no, don't do it. Like, it'd be embarrassing to be a part of something his mom is running. I get it, because my mom showed up for like basically a school thing when I was in 6th grade, where basically your parents show up and tell you what they did, and my mom did it, and I just kept my head down the entire time. I don't know why I was embarrassed. It's like, it's not like my mom isn't like a weird job, or she's a nurse, so I don't know, but it's still that embarrassing thing of like, geez, mom, why you have to be here? And I was like, what, maybe like 11, or I was like 11 or so at the time, maybe. 11 or 12, whatever the case may be. It's just kind of made me think of that. I love that she was saying like, well, Kwame can run it because he's, he'd be excited to do it and stuff like that. Because I love her interaction with Kwame earlier too. He's like, oh, you gonna get that thing from me? She's like, in a couple of days. She's like, do you actually need it, or are you just bored? And he's like, I'm bored, but come on, we could do this, we could do that, stuff like that. I was like, I love that, because she's balancing so many jobs, just trying to make ends meet, pay her bills and stuff. So she's like, yeah, like, I've got 3 other jobs that kind of take precedence over you, Kwame. He's like, yeah, well, if it wasn't for me, you wouldn't be where you are right now, so come on. But it's like, yeah, he's just bored, doesn't have much else to do. I love that. Obviously, I love Nicole's interaction with Tevin, And obviously they got up, like, it started off like, oh, a little flirtatious, and then she found out he has powers, and that changed everything, which I was like, he'll cut her some slack later on. I wasn't expecting him to find out so soon that her circumstances, but it's like, yeah, of course she's going to have a bias against powered people, specifically older men with powers, just because it's like, right, Pat, like, she was so close to him, they were so tight-knit, to find out he's the one that murdered your husband, along with Charlotte, who was becoming a good friend of yours, and he was lying and manipulating you and trying to take your son from you, like, right in front of your eyes. So it's like, yeah, Pat was kind of like family to some extent, and for him to be betray you like that, to be not the person you thought he was, is going to leave some scars. It's going to leave some trauma. So she was kind of taking it down on Tevin. I love the whole thing of like, he's like, "Are you following me?" She's like, "No." He's like, "It feels like you're following me." So, because initially it seems like the person who was training him before was Margaret. She was a regular person. So I was like, right, we need to get someone that's powered to be there to help Dion. Because it also helps to have someone else in front of you who has powers to be a better person. You know, it's like, right, because prior to this, like, well, you know, he had Charlotte. She was rough around the edges, but she was good in her own. Because at the end of the day, Dion knows she was a good person, even though she was kind of a bit of a meanie. But, yeah, like, to have someone else, you know, fill that role of a mentor, especially because, like, Pat was supposed to be, she was initially his mentor and everything, so it's like, right, they kind of erase a lot of that, you know, because it's like, right, Tevin isn't Pat, so it isn't just for Dion, but it's also for Nicole to realize, like, hey, he's not that bad of a guy, which Biana is having its own issues, not issues, but it's going to turn into something, you know it will, under these circumstances. But there's that David guy being like, oh man, if we could harness the power, that he's like, but Suzanne was like, no, we're not doing that, like, we're going to help them. He's like, yeah, but you can think about the possibilities. Like, yeah, but then we have, like, but then there's, like, the whole Crooked Man thing. He's like, Crooked? She's like, yeah, that's what Dion called it, Crooked, like, you know, lightning. He's like, yeah, sure, whatever. But it's like, yeah, after the whole Pat thing, it's like, let's just focus on helping people. And I think that speaks volumes that it's Suzanne who's saying that, you know? Because when you initially met her, you thought she'd be the one saying what David's saying. But she's like, no, let's go at this from a different perspective. I even love her interaction with Nicole, because it's funny and ironic that Pat was like, man, my boss hates me. And it's like, yeah, she hated you, but man, does she love Nicole. She's super tight-knit with Nicole. The argument could be like, well, you just kind of give me, because like the only time Susanna was like happy around him was around Pat was because Dion was around. So she's like super happy to be around him, just because it's like, yeah, your dad and his research, he was good to us and stuff. So she's definitely, I mean, not unless they do like a Shyamalan twist or something to her. I think she's going to be put in a complicated situation where she kind of ends up borderline in between good and bad, but I think she is a good person. She just sometimes, like, especially last season, kind of rubbed you the wrong way with the links and the way she went about things. You're kind of like, yeah, but I think she's gotten better, because I even loved him joking. I was like, yeah, she's like, yeah, we fought a power person together, and she's like, fought? From what I remember, you got knocked out immediately. Susanna was like, it's gonna be like that, huh? You know, to the fact that they can joke and stuff like that is so fascinating. So, but I do like that. Obviously, we are seeing Dion's powers like expand, even to the point that it's like, oh, do you have intangibility? And he was like, oh, is it this? And he creates a little hurricane in his hands. And he was like, I don't know, I didn't know what you meant. He's like, so you just made up a new power? He's like, I guess. I was like, okay, that's interesting. I am curious what he meant specifically by intangibility. I wonder, was that, my brain immediately takes that as like, oh, like, I mean, maybe it kind of, maybe just like, oh, like things that aren't tangible, like maybe you can just like make stuff that is, I don't know. Or maybe he was like, because my initial thought was like, could he be like, oh, can you make your body intangible so that you could kind of like, almost like phase through things? But I don't know. But kind of getting the lay in the lands of like, right, his powers continue to expand, even to the point like we're not even fully sure all that he's capable of doing, because he can do a little bit of everything. But I think maybe that's because part of me wonders, if you've seen the show Misfits, I will always like reference the show Misfits because I love the show Misfits, but everyone's powers kind of correlate to their personality to some extent. So, you know, the fact is, so I'm wondering, is there some correlation in this? Like, the fact is, Pat ended up getting the power he got. Granted, it ended up becoming a monster all on its own, so that's a different thing. To be fair, it was made up of multiple bits. It wasn't just one bit of that meteorite stuff or whatever landed on him. We don't know if anyone else got it the way Pat did. Like, it seemed like he was the only one that got hit multiple times, and all that culminated in the storm. But Pat had some issues of its own, and like I said, that power like delved into that darkness a little bit more. The question is, was that power always going to be dark, or is it only dark because it manifested that way because of Pat, or because of his own darkness? Like, for example, Charlotte turning invisible, like, is that because, like, did she always kind of hide away from life and stuff like that? Big question. So that's why I'm like, Dion, for example, has so many abilities because as a child, he has such a large array of wonderment and always, believing in magic, that it manifested in such a way that it's like, cool, like, it can be whatever he wants it to be. He can make as many abilities as he wants, potentially. The reason why I correlated that to Misfits is, like, a lot of people's abilities in that show, especially, I think everyone's is worked like this, but you can definitely see it amongst the main cast, definitely, that their powers kind of correlated with some of their, I mean, even Rudy having his ability to split himself, it's like, well, he probably had some, like, complicated emotional issues at the time, so, like, probably he had like a bipolar thing kind of going on, so I think maybe that's what it's manifesting as. Or like Simon turning invisible because he always felt invisible to people. So like that's why I'm like, is there a correlation to why certain people got the abilities they did, or am I just overthinking it? Which strong possibility, but ever since Misfits, I always look at people getting powers like that. It's like, oh, maybe there's a specific reason why you got the powers you got. We did get to, speaking of powers, we did get to meet some other people who are all, at Biona training their abilities. In particular, there's the person, Janelle, who was kind of over it. We don't know what her circumstances are, but she's just like, bam, used her powers and just went back. And it's just like, it seemed like for a moment her and Dion had a connection. Once again, we don't know what her circumstances are, but we're definitely going to be getting a lot more powered people this season, which is going to be interesting. We got some hints to some of the other OG people that were there at the Aurora event that got the abilities, but mainly we spent time with Charlotte, Dion, and Pat. They kind of really showcased their abilities, but now we're going to get other array of abilities as well. But circling back to it, even though I went on a huge tangent, I did like the showdown between Tevin and Dion doing their thing. That was pretty impressive, like the flipping cartwheel, sliding on the table. It was pretty dope. But I do like that Tevin and Nicole could make up. And I love Dion being like, just stand there and let her talk and you'll be fine. Like, trying to give him advice about how to handle the whole Nicole situation. But they did make up, and she's like, right, I had a pretty traumatic experience. But it's like, right, Susanna reminded me that you're not Pat, and, that I can trust you. He's like, I don't worry, I will protect your boy. I will protect both of you. I promise. But nevertheless, it is interesting to see that Kat is back, and some life changes have happened since she kind of lost her job. It seems like she kind of went on a journey to find herself, and she's back. Apparently, she met someone. She sold her house, and she's like, yeah, I'll stay here for a while. And Nicole's kind of like, cool, because I'm not just juggling everything in the world, trying to pay bills, all these jobs, Dion, the superpower stuff, like all of this. So plus, like, her and her sister kind of get along sometimes, like water and oil sometimes. But still, that's definitely going to be interesting having her around a lot. Because also, like, she always felt like, right, her sister can be critical of her sometimes. So, like, I'm sure for Nicole that's going to be complicated to deal with from time to time. It's going to be interesting. I find it fascinating that Kat was like, oh, is he still doing that whole thing even though Mark is dead? It's like, I wonder because she's making videos, right, if his dad ever comes back, he'll be able to catch him up on everything. And she's like, yeah, but Mark is dead, right? It's like, yeah, but, it's his way of dealing with things, and everyone deals with things in their own way. It's his way of processing everything. But I'm like, did she not tell... She must not have told Kat about what they experienced in the season 1 finale with Mark coming back a little bit, So he still is out there in some shape or form, and maybe they can potentially bring him back. Maybe he isn't like full-blown dead, but The fact is that Kat said that must mean they, I guess it'd be too much to like explain that to Kat as well. Or, I mean, considering the powers and everything, you'd assume it wouldn't be too out of the realm of possibility, but maybe it's also because Nicole doesn't want to hope. So she's just kind of keeping Mark dead in her mind too, just because it's like, right, that was like a one-off thing. Like there's no guarantee he can actually come back. So maybe that's what she's thinking of. Like, right, she has to move on and needs to move on. You know, maybe that's her justification. Maybe that's her thought. I don't know. But we also have the Storm deciding that, you know, the Crooked Energy, that it's going to make an army of its own. That way, you know, it's like, right, you went up against Dion and you lost last time. He's like, yeah, but I'm going to have an army of my own. So at least a spot here in town in Atlanta is behind the school, is going to be the hotbed for it creating its own army. But I wonder, does the same thing apply to the other spots, or are those other spots just going to be other spots of corruption like in Iceland that are just slowly going to be opening up and spreading, or are they going to eventually turn into little spots that they can eventually make soldiers from as well? We'll have to wait and see. But poor Gary, that sucks, especially because Esperanza likes him. There's the whole thing they have between, like, oh, him helping her grow those flowers and stuff, especially because her own dad's too busy, you know, he's working and traveling, so she doesn't really have him to, like, help her with the plants, so Gary was trying to, which was really sweet. It's this beautiful thing, too, when he's, like, down there taking pictures. He's like, oh, man, Esperanza's not going to believe this. And it's like, oh, this is beautiful, this is magical, until they start stinging him, and we see, looks like a pretty bad possession, which you're like, I hope this doesn't go the route of spoilers, lock and key. I won't go into it too much, but hopefully, I doubt it'll get depressing like that, considering the fact is we, you know, jumping ahead a tiny bit, we have Pat being back, so hopefully there's a way to kind of cure anyone that's being controlled right now. Once again, if you've seen season 2 of Lock and Key, ooh, the solution for that's kind of rough. But nevertheless. But speaking of Pat's return, that is interesting. He's like, I don't have powers anymore. I'm trying to prepare you for what's coming. Something terrible is coming. So that's what I'm saying. I think 3 months ago, Pat was able to kind of separate himself potentially from that power. Like, not unless he's been back the entire 2 years or something like that, and maybe he just wanted to disappear. Maybe he didn't have his memories and he was lost for a while, or maybe he just wanted to get away as penance of, like, right, I can't go back to anyone because he blew up his life. The only people he had left in this world all hate him now, so he can't go back near them. So, but, like, why choose now? It must be because of the storm. He knows it's up to something because he was connected to it for years. So he would understand it better than anyone else. But, kind of got spoiled for me in the trailer, but I'm actually surprised they threw that out there this early. I was kind of thinking, like, oh, that's going to be a couple episodes in. It's like, no, they threw that in as the first episode stinger. I thought that was interesting. But like I said, because of the trailer, I already knew it was coming, but still, learning the circumstances around that's definitely going to be interesting, of like how you're here, why you're helping now. Once again, how much of what he did was himself, how much was the monster, how much of it was the monster's influence upon him. We'll have to wait and see, but I'm excited to see where all this takes us. Obviously, I'm watching these one episode at a time. I've only seen episode 1, so I'm reviewing it now, and I'll do the same thing, as I watch the other episodes. Obviously, when I'm done with reviewing the entire season, episode by episode, I'll eventually put them all up at once. I won't make any guarantees of when that will be, but just know if you're seeing this one, that means the other ones are either already up or are in the process of being up, or process of going live, so just keep that in mind. But either way, I'm excited to see where the rest of Season 2 ends up taking us going forward into the next episode. But really, that's all I'm going to talk about. Until the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day, and goodbye.